I was addicted to corn for over 14 years. I've stacked 400 plus days on nofap and even cured my corn induced ED in just 1 week. And I help men get those achievements in half the time and make progress in half the time. Now, in this video today, I'll show you why you can't half quit. You have to go completely all in, do or die, and why you need to burn the boats in order to achieve this standard and actually officially quit, make progress, cure your dysfunctions, and become the man that you know you're capable of being. Now, number one, the brutal cost of staying stuck, right? Now, what happens, right, is a lot of people end up in the same place time after time again, right? And what does this look like? The corn is destroying your confidence, right? Because anytime you're a person who, you have potential, you have these other things that you want to do in your life, and you tell yourself that you're going to quit time and time again, but you don't actually follow up on what you're saying, what is that called? Lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself about what you know is possible. You know it's possible. You've probably had some times where you've gone, a couple streaks on the nofap and all that. But what's crazy is when you lie to yourself, there's just something in the back of your mind in terms of confidence that you have that it just wipes it out, right? Because if you lie to yourself, who can you actually trust? We're talking about your future, right? We're talking about your relationships, all of these different things. And when you have areas of compromise and vices in your life, how can you actually become the man that you know you're capable of being? Maybe that's, entrepreneurship. You're trying to make more money, right? Maybe you're trying to get a raise at your job. All of these things, it will affect your life in those small details because you won't have that type of confidence that you know you could have if you were honest and truthful and really kept those promises that you said to yourself. Now, we talk about also the dysfunctions, right? The ED, the DE, all of these different things, right? Where it kind of strips away at your masculinity and even your ability to get into those types of relationships, right? Because if you know you have issues where you're not going to be able to get it up, or even some people get embarrassed from not being able to finish, what happens, right? You're in a position to where you almost don't feel like you even want to go for relationships, right? And then things like isolation and all these other things come up. And it really makes sense why there's almost some sort of male loneliness epidemic going on, right? It's because you have all of these ways that, I like to say, all of these ways that you can satisfy yourself, right? And what happens when you have all of those things is you tend to take the easiest route, right? So instead of going for, the women, going for the friendships, all these other things, we spend so much time on the devices and our phone and all these things because it's the path of least resistance, right? Now, also, you have things like anxiety, depression, right? And even brain fog, right? And these are all pieces that come along with this addiction, right? And probably many of you have noticed a lot of times even social anxiety, right? You're in your head all the time when you're out. You probably don't approach women, even if it's someone that maybe you see has a nice outfit on or something like that. You don't even give bro a compliment, right? You just become less social and almost a shell of yourself. And then also, let's just talk about the time aspect, which in my opinion is one of the biggest ones, right? Because as someone who's into entrepreneurship and is really just about, being efficient and effective with my time. When you really think about it, man, time is the most finite resource that we have, right? And if you say that I'm going to spend all of my time and you're going to waste it, right? Doing an activity, right? Relapsing that literally gets you nothing in return. That's the craziest outcome. Like, that's insane to do if you literally think about it. You're doing something that's harming you, right? It's harming your brain. And you literally get nothing out of it, right? All you do after you relapse is you feel worse about yourself, your situation, all of that. You literally feel worse. So you literally have nerfed yourself in a sense. You've lost your most valuable resource, right? Which things like time, energy, and attention. And now you're just in a deeper, hole. And, some people even end up, right, spending the money, right? You got OF, you got all these other things where people actually spend money on this. So there could even be a financial loss as well, which is even crazier, right? And what's the worst part about all of this, right? Years continue to go by and you still make no progress, right? You wake up pretty much the same man that you were in the past. Nothing has changed. And you really look at yourself and really wonder, like, is this even possible, right? Is it even possible to actually change, to quit the corn, to at least be in control, right, of the lust, all of those things? Is it even possible, right? And that's one of the worst feelings that you can wake up and have, being stuck in the same place over and over and over again. Second point, no more half quitting. Now, there's this concept, right, that when people try to break, right, bad habits, addictions, any of these things, what they try to do is weave themselves off of it, right? So let's say it's consuming, right, a certain type of content, or even let's say, you eat sweets a lot or all these other things. A lot of times people will try to lower the frequency, right? So it might be 3, times and maybe 2 times a week, then 1 time a week, and then they lower it like that. And here's the problem with that, right? It's just a lie and you're justifying your habit, right? Now, when we talk about brain rewiring, what happens is a lot of times, right, you just can't have one look. And that's the tough part about this, right? You think about if you're having a cookie, right? Or if you're having chips, they literally call it chips for a reason, because you're not just going to have one, you're going to have multiple. And that's what happens with this a lot of times. Even if people try to reduce their frequency, a lot of the times it's easier just to go cold turkey and just try to quit. And obviously you're going to need other things in place as well, as opposed to just weaning yourself off, reducing the frequency, right? And that dopamine spike, right? Regardless of how rare you do this, right? You do 3, 2, 1. It's still that same dopamine spike, and it still keeps those patterns that, that wiring that was made in your brain the same way. Now, of course, it's healthier to do less, but really for a lot of people's goals, it's to be in control of this and put those pieces in place so that they can have control and that things like lust don't control their life, right? And the reason why I say no half quitting as well is just because, right, a lot of times people try this method and it doesn't work for them, and then they almost try to just do it over and over again and expect a different result. And we always say you're a crazy person if you do something over and over again and expect a different result. So keep that in mind. Things will not change unless you change, right? And freedom really only comes when you go all in and you commit to complete elimination, right? So you can't just have something on your phone, whatever. You really need to rewire your brain, become strong again, rewire that part of your brain. And then maybe then you can talk about reintroducing certain things like social media, dating apps, all of that stuff. But build your foundation first, right? That's the most important thing you can do, right? And I always say a lot of people question if it's even possible, right, to quit, to be at least in control, right? Because that's the main thing to cure the dysfunctions, right? The ED, the DE as well, all of these things, right? And you should click the link in the description down below where I have a nofap course. I teach you everything I've learned over these 14 years, how to cure the dysfunctions, especially people with the corn-induced ED, how to quit this addiction, how to be in control of your lust once and for all. Now, number 3, burn the boats. This is a good one. Now, imagine, right, you're on a ship, right? You're on a ship and you're sailing somewhere, right? You're sailing somewhere. And I should say burn the bridges, but you're sailing somewhere, and what happens, right? You have a path that you walked onto the boat from that connected you, right? And what you really need to do, right? And what happens in these different stories is they actually burn the ladder that's connecting the boat to the land. And now they're completely on sea and there's no returning back. And although this is an analogy, this is how you should look at this bad habit, right? You should look at it in terms of, I need to burn the bridges. Burn the bridges means you're not looking back, questioning if you're doing the right thing. And don't get me wrong, there are going to be times where it's going to be tough. I'm not here to tell you it's going to be easy all of the time. But if you put the right things in place, right? We're talking about lifestyle, we're talking about diet, right? We're talking about simple things. Sleep. We're talking about the environment you have on the phone, the environment you live in your real world, your social life. All of these different things really help craft a life that is more meaningful than going back to the corn. And that's one of the biggest things. We want you to create a lifestyle and just a life that you enjoy so much that there's no point in even going back in the first place, right? So you really need to burn the bridges, right? Whether that's deleting accounts, unfollowing, right? Do all these things. I'm not a huge fan of blocking sites, to be honest, but again, there's never a one size fits all, and that's what you need to try and figure out what works for you, right? But it's really about removing those safety nets and allowing yourself to operate in an environment that is conducive to your success, right? And your brain only adapts when there's no way to go back, right? When there's no way to go back, then your brain says, okay, this is default. I'm going to have to figure some things out, right? And that's what happens when you start to rewire. Now, are there things that definitely can speed this up? Absolutely. But number one, you have to understand, right, the fundamentals of just burning the bridges, right? And men who leave the exit door open, right, always end up using it, right? So don't leave the door open. Close that door back there, burn the bridges, jump ship, and make it happen. Number 4, the standard you hold yourself to. Now, goals are really useless if your standards are low, right? And when we think about goals, there's something, man, you want to do, right? Again, like I said, whether it's make more money, whether it's be fit, right? You have these different type of goals. Maybe it's get into a relationship, have a family. There are these different types of goals that you have. And you know that the corn is in direct conflict with these goals that you want because there are 3 main keys to achieving what you want, right? It's how you use your time, energy, and attention. So I don't care what goal you have, but the truth is, it kills your time for sure, right? Because you relapse, man, and a lot of you, it's probably multiple times a day, right? You can't go a certain amount of time. That is time wasted, absolutely time wasted, right? And people wonder, and you look back and you wonder, man, why can't I achieve these goals? It's because you can't focus, right? You don't have the time. You don't have the attention, right? Because your attention is all over the place. You have brain fog, and you can't just sit down and go through something that's difficult. You have to have an easy way out, right? And then time, energy, right? We talked about attention, energy, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but after you relapse, your energy is gone. Like, you're just at this low frequency state of yourself. Your energy is super low, right? So keep that in mind, right? You need these 3 factors to even reach those type of goals that you have, right? So what you need to do is have some sort of standard in your life to reach those types of goals, right? So if your standard, think about it, is I'll slip sometimes, right? Or maybe, it's okay every now and then. I mean, what type of, are you really going to be able to reach your goals like that, right? You have to think of what type of man do you want to become, right? And that's the level that you'll rise to, right? So always keep your standards high for what you want to achieve for yourself, right? Your goal really should be to have complete control over yourself, live a viceless lifestyle, because why would you want to do it any other way, right? And this mindset really creates an identity shift in you to a guy, instead of I'm a guy who's trying to quit, it's I'm a guy who has these type of goals, who knows where I'm going, right? Who knows where I'm going in life, who knows how to lead, have relationships, right? Control his own 2 hands. And you're a man who doesn't need it because you live such a fulfilling life. Point 5, building towards bigger goals, right? Always remember, right? And we talked about in the last point, quitting the corn is never the big goal, right? It's the foundation to help you get there faster, right? And you all know, especially if you want to build a business, you want to do anything, it takes such a strong focus and it takes a lot of time, right? And intentionality to build something from scratch. So you really need to be locked in, right? The corn is not going to help you, right? It's not. It's literally going to it's going to make whatever you're doing take even longer, right? And then once you start getting on this path to where you get your habits in check, right? You're kind of living a lifestyle that doesn't need to go back to these bad habits. What happens, right? You can train harder now in the gym, right? You have more time, more energy, attention, and focus to make the money that you want to make. Maybe it's to talking to more women, right? Your focus kind of returns so you can sit down here and record a 10, 20, 30-minute video. You can study for these exams, right? You can build a business, you can read, you can learn without being distracted by all of these different things, right? And your confidence begins to rise because you start believing in yourself. You start believing, right, in the goals that you have because you're keeping the promises that you told yourself. You're able to put in the work that needs to be put in, right? You stop hiding and start showing up as a real man, a man that people respect, a man of his word, right? And quitting is just the first step, right? The real mission is to build a life that is so good that you never need to go back. Interested in learning more? Click this video on the screen right here.